Hello everyone, coming off the UFC Baku card, their debut in Azerbaijan, and ready to give you my thoughts on the card, as well as, let's be honest, we gotta talk about the Jon Jones news. Jon Jones, no longer UFC heavyweight champion, also retired, also probably facing criminal charges relating to an event with drugs, a woman, and a car. So very on brand for Jon Jones, if we're being entirely honest, given his previous past with women, drugs, and cars. So that's probably more likely to have a role to do with this retirement than anything else. And Tom Aspinall is now your UFC heavyweight champion. And sadly, we're going to get that without getting the actual Jones versus Aspinall fight. And all things considered, I'm happy to have this be at an end. Obviously, I would have preferred to have Aspinall versus Jones settle this in the cage. That would be the perfect answer. That would be the ideal. And also have Jones versus Francis Ngannou. But we can't get what we want, so we have to get what we can get. And that is finally having an active UFC heavyweight champion again. Theoretically, I mean, it could be that Aspinall proceeds to be as inactive as Jon Jones, but there is every indication that he is indeed going to be about as he's going to actually be an active champion, that he actually wants to be an active champion. Granted, there are not a lot of great fights for him moving forward. There is the Cyril Gane fight, presumably. I can't even really think of anything else I would be super particularly excited for, but I guess let's just pull up the UFC rankings here real quick and have a look if there's someone whose name is eluding me right this second. So you got Alexander Volkov, not super interested. Sergey Pavlovich, we've already seen. We've already seen Curtis Blaydes. Haven't seen Jailton Almeida, but I feel like I know how that fight would play out. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, I expect to see Almeida get a title shot at some point. He's been having a very, 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 very solid run at heavyweight outside of losing to Curtis Blaydes. But I can't say that I'd be dying for an Aspinall versus Almeida fight. It's just not really something I would be absolutely clamoring from. And then you're down to Waldo Cortez Acosta, Marcin Tybura, Sergey Spivak. These are not interesting. So there is that significant problem for Aspinall going forward. Is the division is in a probably one of the darkest places it's ever been. We're kind of back at the Tim Sylvia era of how good this division is, and how that obviously handicaps Sylvia as a champion. Will probably come home to roost with Aspinall as well, but we'll see. I wish him the best in trying to redefine this division as something better than what it has been. We'll find out. And let's get into the UFC Baku card, which I went 6-6 on, so not a good showing in terms of the win-loss ratio. I will say some of the losses I think I did come up with a reasonable flow of events, so I feel like there are only a couple of fights that I feel very, very wrong about, which would be the Elliott fight, which, to be clear, given that Elliott was a major favorite, I don't feel particularly bad about that. I think that's also the other thing, is that there were a lot of underdogs who won on this fight card. So, based on the odds that I had when I did the predictions, and they may have switched and so on, but when I placed my bets and so on, the following underdogs won. Rafael Fiziev, which I did call, and so that's one. We had, after that, you had Ko was a massive underdog, a plus 300, plus 400 underdog, so that's a pretty big deal. Also, we had a win for Daria Zheleznikova. We had a win for Claudia Segula. That's 4. We had 5 with Mohamed Usman. So yeah, 5 out of 12 underdogs winning. It's a pretty big number, honestly. I think that's definitely on the higher end of things. I'm sure there's a card, if I look back far enough, that had more underdogs winning than that. But, and I again, outside of the Ko fight, I don't think that they're necessarily massive upsets. They were all fights that I could definitely see going the way that they went. But, it did make me feel, I guess, a little bit better about going 6-6. So let's talk about the fights here. Khalil Roundtree versus Jamal Hill. And this is the fight that really soured the card, because up until this point, this card was not very good, but it was heading towards a good climax. You had the Fiziev versus Bahamondes fight, which was quite good. We'll talk about that more in detail. We had the Oralbai versus Musayev fight, which was pretty okay. Sadikov versus Moto was a very, very good fight. And then Naimov versus Gribe was okay. So the main card was largely delivering at a pretty decent level, and we were thinking this main event would be at least exciting, if not in any way technically proficient, but at least exciting. And at the end of the day, we just didn't get that. Now, I do not fault the UFC for putting these guys together and thinking it would be an exciting fight, because I thought it would be. Two guys who are known for knocking people out, and let's be honest, actually kind of known for getting knocked out because of their shoddy defense at times and questionable durability. It felt like a for sure finish, and it felt like something that was going to be at least pretty entertaining. But at the end of the day, Khalil Roundtree just kind of completely neutered Jamal Hill's game. Now, I say that, but like realistically, actually, I've come to the conclusion. So every Jamal Hill fight, I've had this debate, predictively speaking, where I'm trying to figure out if I want to say that Jamal Hill is a terrible fight mind, or if I want to say that his coaching is just like not very good. And I think I've come to the conclusion that it's actually the coaching, because in between rounds, the advice he was getting from the corner was quite bad. It was, take the center of the cage. Okay, that's fine. I'm with you so far. That's okay. And make him come to you. Now, the thing is that, number one, Khalil Roundtree does not need to come to Hill to make his offense work. He was able to lace the legs of Jamal Hill, which is a common problem because Hill's stance and just how he carries himself begs to be kicked in the legs. So you have that in play. You have the fact that, despite the fact that Hill is the larger fighter in terms of attack range, being 6'4" with a 79-inch reach to 6'1" with a 76.5-inch reach, there was nothing about the boxing of Hill that was forcing Roundtree to come inside. Roundtree was able to basically kind of just like light him up from like the very outside of the pocket, basically just like kind of just finding the very edge of punching range, and then bam, like there was a right hand there pretty consistently. It didn't really matter if it was a hook, if it was an overhand, if it was a straight. It did not matter. So when they're like, just make him come to you, it's like there's no advice to make him come to you. There's no reason that he would do that willingly. Like there's no default condition for Hill to come to you, or for Roundtree to come to you, I should say. So the corner advice was terrible, and I'm starting to believe, realistically, that maybe if Jamal Hill was actually at a good gym, we might actually see somebody who could mold the natural physical tools of Hill, which are great. He's big, he's strong, he's fairly durable and tough. He's quite quick, actually, for his size. He reacts to the chaos of MMA very, very well. Like all of these natural things that you theoretically cannot teach, he actually has. And it was kind of always just assumed that, like, okay, he's a big fish in a small pond, but like that he's also somewhat uncoachable. And now I'm just pretty sure that their coaches are they're very bad. I'm kind of interested to see what would happen if he were to go somewhere else. But I mean, unfortunately, he's 34 years old, and even at 205, that's a little bit late to be kind of like completely breaking down your career and getting going, like Henry Hoof style. But my God, if Henry Hoof had gotten his hands on this guy earlier, and he's not training with Henry Hoof now, at least to my knowledge, but like imagine Henry Hoof getting their hands on like a 28-year-old Jamal Hill. Man, this guy went to the title without like any kind of tactical or really even strategic game. Well, anyways, Roundtree got the win here. There's not much else to say. I thought you could probably give the second round to Hill. There was a moment where he caught Roundtree's kick and kind of dumped him, and then came down with like this really hard, kind of just like the hammer drop, basically. And that was like probably the strongest strike he had had in the fight, and probably between the two of them up until that time. And the numbers in that fight in that round were like pretty close. So it was like, I could probably see giving him that one, but like Hill wins 1, 3, 4, 5, knocks him down twice in the third. I gave it a 10-8 in the third. Outstruck him numbers-wise, 17-14, 15-6, 18-8, and 37-26. And then like I guess the fifth round was reasonably good because at least there was some action there. There was like 60-ish strikes landed between the two of them. So like that heated up at least. But prior to that, it was a pretty low output fight, and one that wasn't really a tactical chess match because only one guy was playing chess, and the other one was playing absolute checkers. So congratulations to Khalil Roundtree getting the job done, and I do not hate on him at all for taking a more cautious approach to the fight. But because this was about the whole total package of Hill and his coaching not being able to force the type of fight that they needed to, and that I thought they would be able to. So there you go. Congratulations, Khalil Roundtree. Big win. Not one that I'm going to watch again, probably, but it is getting the job done, and that is pathway number one. And of course, the main reason I picked Hill is that if this was what the UFC wanted, which was a banger, then Hill at some point would just catch him. So I don't blame him at all for not throwing down with him at the very end. I do not blame him at all for anything he did. And I think that Jamal Hill at the end kind of like being like, oh, get it, man. I don't know why you just didn't throw down. Like, it kind of indicates the limitations of Jamal Hill having a champion's level physique. And a champion's level, like, how do I put this? A champion's level mind in the firefight, but not a champion's level camp and not a champion's level fight IQ is what it comes down to. And he's not the only fighter I'm going to hate on the corner from, because Oban Elliott, you're coming up. But I think it probably does kind of secure him as like probably the worst light heavyweight champion relative to his time period in UFC history. So there is that. And then there was Rafael Fiziev versus Ignacio Bahamondes, which I couldn't believe that I got Fiziev at underdog odds, because like Rafael Fiziev can do a lot of what Ludovic Klein did and a lot of what John McDessie did, and better than those guys, because he has more physical tools than both of those guys. And he did that. Largely. Now, I'm going to say a lot of nice things about Bahamondes here, and it's kind of weird because he was a betting favorite, so you kind of have to take this based on the crowd's opinion, based on the fandom's opinion, based on the betting community's thoughts that this is actually a letdown performance from him. But I personally was pretty impressed. For the most part, he avoided some of the reckless crashing of the pocket that he tends to do in a lot of his fights. It was still there. There were moments where his nature got the better of him. His default aggressive setting got the better of him, and he would do some silly things, and Fiziev would punish him for that. But there was not a lot of that. There was some abusive range. There was... It's very much a work in progress, but he is slowly turning into a guy who actually fights like a 6'3" lightweight. But it was a fun fight throughout, but it did feel like Fiziev was getting the better of basically any exchange that they would have, that he would land the cleaner strikes, the more damaging strikes, and that he was still to a large degree directing traffic, and then even mixing in some takedowns late in the fight, although outside of like at the end of round 3, there wasn't a lot he did with the top position. He did get a moment at the end of round 3, not like the very end of it, but like near the end of it, where he was crushing Bahamondes with some ground and pound and doing like a really, really good job. So there was that. But yeah, he outlanded Bahamondes in all 3 rounds per UFC stats by not like massive numbers. So you could definitely get Bahamondes around here at some point, but I did agree with the 30-27 scorecards. That being said, this is a classic example of a fight that is much closer than the quote-unquote clean sweep would indicate, because a lot of people on like kind of like a year after a fight or something on Twitter will be arguing, or social media will be arguing like, well, this was actually a really close fight. And they'll pick a fight that has like 3 definitive rounds for somebody. Sean O'Malley, Merab Dvalishvili is a great example of this, where like I was debating with somebody who's like, it was a 48-47 fight. How do you say he would get dominated? Because he cleanly got dominated in the 3 rounds that he lost. And the 2 rounds that he won, Merab kind of took off. This is an example of like Fiziev had to work for all 3 of these rounds. There was not a easy round for him. So yes, did he win 30-27 on my scorecard? Absolutely. Was it a domination? No. That 30-27 does not tell you the full story because of how competitive all 3 rounds were. So, in my opinion, Bahamondes is becoming better, but at the same time, I do have to think that this is a bit of a hype stopper for him, because people had him favored against Fiziev. I do not understand that. I did not get that, and I will happily take their money. I will happily take the cash. Curtis Blades versus Rizvan Kuniev. Not a great fight. I scored the first and the third round for Blades, the second round for Kuniev. There's a lot of people calling like a robbery here that Kuniev should have won, and I don't really understand why. Don't get me. I could see how you scored the fight for him. Round one is round one is not a great round for Blades at all. Like there's not a lot of differential, although apparently according to UFC stats he outlanded him 21-13, go figure. But Kuniev I thought did land the harder shots there, so you could theoretically give him that round. And the second round was the best round of the bunch for somebody, but I think he did clearly lose the third round. Don't get me wrong, a lot of it is just like pushing Kuniev up against the cage and stuff, but like it's just volume at that point. Like Blades outlanded him heavily, like 4-1, 3-1 at least in that round, and it's really hard to see where the robbery talk comes in. Like, I'm not saying that you can't score this fight 29-28 for Kuniev, but I don't think you can get upset about it. As for what does this mean for Kuniev and Blades, probably not great things. Apparently Blades messed up his MCL in the first round. That was what he said in this post-fight. So I guess you can leave a certain level of charitable thought about that there was an injury at play. But I don't know. He did not look great to me, but Kuniev also did not look great. Kuniev also looked like he got tired towards the end, which, fair play, but at the same time, yes, it's heavyweight. Yes, cardio is a secondary concern at best, but at some point you do have to be able to go 15 minutes. And I'm not terribly convinced that Kuniev can in fact do that. So I don't know. I'm not going to really talk much more about that fight. Miktabik Oralbai beat Tafik Musayev with a heavy wrestling approach and got a Kimura submission. This was not surprising, but apparently, I don't know, there was some like weird stuff on commentary about how Oralbai was talking about this being a new approach and commentary believing him. It's like, no, like this is how Oralbai fights every single time. This is not surprising. I did pick Musayev. I thought that he would be able to at least shut down the takedowns to a reasonable level, and the fact that Oralbai is very, very hittable on the feet would lead to enough damage, and that like he would just that he would survive the wrestling options and just kind of pot shot him. But at the same time, I was worried about this being just a size comparison sort of thing, and it ended up being that case. 3 takedowns and eventually for lightweight a very rare submission because it's a strongman submission of a Kimura. So good work by Oralbai. Probably not the result the UFC was hoping for in front of an Azerbaijani crowd. They're only like actual born in Azerbaijan fighter on the card, because I know Fiziyev's deal is that his dad was born in Azerbaijan, but he was born in Kazakhstan, grew up in Kyrgyzstan, lives in Thailand. So like the ties are, don't get me wrong, rep whatever country you want to rep, but the ties were a little bit weak, but They roared for him. They were cheering for him. They were big on him. And then with Nazim Sadikov, who is the other, air quotes, Azerbaijani fighter, he's from Russia, Moscow apparently, and has largely grown up in the United States. And of course, trains out of the United States, made his MMA debut on the United States scene. So that one's a little bit questionable as well, but they were also big on him. So it's up to them. It's up to them to embrace him. But I think saying that there were 3 Azerbaijani fighters on this card is probably stretching the definition a little bit. But Oralbai got the win here, and then Sadikov versus Nicholas Mota. This was a great fight. This was so much fun. Nicholas Mota came out and actually did really well. He had Sadikov hurt. He had Sadikov covering up along the fence, getting ripped to the body, getting ripped to the head, like just unloading. Now, unfortunately, I think Mota maybe shot his load a little bit. Didn't gas out entirely, but I do think he got a little bit tired because he let Sadikov roar back at him in the second round and start to actually, start to really land his own stuff, and utilize some wrestling to grind Mota against the cage. So there was that. Second round, we get a glancing spinning kick from Sadikov to open it up, and then he follows up with a punch and an elbow. He's busted Mota up. Blood, big cut basically between the eyeballs and down to the nose, to the bridge of the nose of Mota. He's not breathing correctly, obviously. From that, probably some structural damage. And he just keeps going. It's like Mota's game, Mota's trying, Mota's firing back, but Sadikov is hitting him like just real clean. Boom, boom, boom. The worst of like every exchange is being taken by Mota. And Sadikov has him up against the fence, starts unloading on him, drops him down to his butt, and the referee steps in to stop the fight, and boom, Nazim Sadikov with a $1,000 bonus off of this card. $100,000 bonus, pardon me. And a great win for him. He continues to roll on and be like, I don't know if there's like a super high level he can get to, but he's a well put together fighter, and he's undefeated in the UFC now at 4-0-1 with that draw with Vyacheslav Borshow. But like he's beaten Terrence McKinney, he's beaten Evan Elder, he's beaten Ishmael Bonfim, he's beaten Nicholas Mota. That's a solid grouping, and I do very much expect that he'll get something fairly big for his next one. And then we had Bogdan Grad versus Muhammad Naimov. This was not as fun as I expected it to be, mostly because Grad was able to implement a fair amount of his game on Naimov by just holding him up against the fence and stuff, and just kind of spamming the aggression, takedowns, and so on. To relatively little avail. He couldn't really control or damage Naimov in any way, but at the same time, it was smothering Naimov's offense. Naimov wins this fight having landed a grand total of 18 significant strikes, although 70 total strikes. But yeah, I gave the second round to Grad for what it's worth, but I gave the first and the third to Naimov. He was just too strong, too physical, and I think unfortunately that is the limitation that we are going to probably run up against a couple of times with Grad's career, is that he is super hard-headed, super durable, super aggressive, and all of those things, and they're all great, and they're him trying to succeed, but they're him trying to succeed in spite of a lack of physical, UFC-level physicality. And I don't really know how much we are really going to see him succeed with that being the case. So, a good win for Naimov. And then we get to the Sokyong Ko fight versus Oban Elliott. Oban Elliott's corner was dumb. They kept talking about how don't let him back you up into the cage. You can't shoot out to the right, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. Just tell him not to clinch, because a lot of the clinches that got Elliott taken down and just ragdolled were initiated by him. You have a 72-inch reach. You are 6 foot tall. Why are you getting into any position? Because it's not like Ko was being masterful with his cagecraft and footwork. He was not. He was just taking what was absolutely just gift wrapped on a platter to him and going, all right, you're going for a ride, and I'm going to show you that I am actually a really good top position lockdown guy. I'm not super brutal. I'm not a particularly great submission guy, but I am going to put you on the ground, and if I put you on the ground, you're not getting up at all. So I don't know. Was I wrong on Ko because I was pretty low on him when he came in? I don't know, because I thought that this fight was more about Oban Elliott having an exposure to a lack of, and I should have seen this coming, I guess, because in hindsight, I was very impressed with this fight with Preston Parsons, because he was able to hang in the clinch with Parsons. But what I should have probably taken off of that is that Parsons was able to get into the clinch really, really easily. And I kind of I credited that to Parsons being a pretty constant pressure guy. It's not a complicated game. It's not even a UFC really winning game, but it is persistent. And I thought that was why it kept happening. Now I'm just wondering if Elliott has any kind of awareness of the cage. and woo. I will say again, I made money off this because I was not gonna. I'm not. If you give minus 500 odds on Oban Elliott, I am going to bet against you, and it doesn't really matter who he's fighting, if I think he's going to win or not. So, not really anything else to say about that fight. Korea also got another win with Jung Young Park defeating Ismail Nardiev. I scored the first round for Nardiev, and then of course you have the 10-7 in the second round with the illegal knee by Nardiev. This was his third foul, by the way. He had 2 eye pokes prior to this, but he gets parked down against the cage. on one knee in the second round, and he knees him right in the eyeball, basically. Smashes him down. It's a beautiful knee. It's a beautiful knee. And then he celebrates, the he thought a stoppage victory, but it was an illegal knee. As a result, we get a prolonged break in the action. Park can go again. We take the 2 points, one for the actual foul itself, one for the damage. And it doesn't really matter because I think Park won the remainder of that round. Although I am told vis-a-vis Twitter that Park won the first round on the cards, which is weird because I thought that was Nauerdiyev's best round, and that Nauerdiev won the second round. Now, I get it. He landed a wicked shot in the second round, but it was illegal. And aside from that, Park got the better of him in that round. So I feel like the... one second, I lost my UFC stats page here because I do like to use UFC stats as much as I can to put some numbers thing. I'm an accountant at heart. But yeah, he outlanded Park 54-28 in the first round. I think that's his best round. Like, if you're not going to give him that round, I don't know how you give him any round. And then, yeah, the second round, Park outlands him 28-25, scores a takedown, 2 minutes top control. Granted, there's a takedown for Nauerdiev as well, but at the same time, I do think you have to give that round to Park. And that's the thing, is like, that's the thing. If you're going to give the second round to Nauerdiev, and have him lose 9-8, obviously, because of the 2-point deduction, but you have to give him the first round then. Like, it's just very weird. And the third round, there's nothing really to talk about. Park gets a takedown, has 4 minutes and a half of top control, just beating him up. I had that as a 10-8 round because there was just nothing that Nauerdiev did. So, by the way, I had 2 10-8 rounds for Ko in the Oban Elia fight because Oban Elia did nothing in the second and third round. So, big day in that regard for the Korean contingent. And then we had Daria Zheleznikova versus Melissa Mullins. Round 1 of this fight looks exactly like their previous fight, where like Zheleznikova is unloading on her in the feet, hitting her clean, beating her up. Like, Mullins is sitting on some counters and landed a couple of good ones. There was a good uppercut in there. But largely, the striking is not on the same page. This it doesn't look like any remote same level of striking ability, which is a lot of Zhelezhnikova's opponent. She's actually a pretty good striker. And Mullins gets a takedown and then starts unloading and then like goes for an armbar from mount position and like loses it. Had she kept throwing shots, I think she actually might have won the fight right there. Honestly, like, I think we would have literally had a repeat of their Aries fight, which was Mullins winning by TKO with like a second on the clock or something. I think we would have honestly had something very, very similar had she not gone for the armbar and just kept going on there. And then after that, Zheleznikova keeps things standing in the second round for the most part. There was a takedown for a minute of top control, but there wasn't a lot of punishment there. And she outlands her. And then the third round, she outlands her again. But again, there's a takedown for about a minute there, and she kind of ran out of gas a little bit. I gave Mullins the third round. I gave Zheleznikova the first 2. But the problem with this fight is that, like, coming out of it, I want to hype up, and this is going to be applicable to the next fight as well. I want to hype up Zheleznikova because this, like, 135 weight class desperately needs something to get excited about. But realistically, this was the same fight that they had, just without the stoppage. And some of her bad habits of getting cut in the clinch, they're still there. Nothing really improved. It's just Mullins did not finish her when she had the chance. So I'm not really sure if I actually raise her stock much. Don't get me wrong. There are fights that she'll definitely win because she has an actual, like, she has a skill set. She has a range striking game. She has a kickboxing game. She's not completely clueless as a grappler or as a clinch fighter, but she does need to learn to avoid those places. And that's about it. So, like, she is the same fighter coming out of this that she was coming in. And then talking about that, largely we have the Claudia Segula versus Irina Alexieva fight. And it was largely Segula, kind of surprising to a certain degree, but like really it was just Alexieva showing up her flaws, which is that realistically the only part of her game that's actually super like dangerous and like fun. Not even fun, but like her path to victory in this fight was the clinch. Get the clinch, get the takedowns, go for the ground game, go for the submissions. I had you by submission because Segula's grappling is questionable. at best. And then she goes through this entire fight without even attempting a takedown. 0 for 0. And she's not a good striker. She is a terrible, terrible striker. She's got like decent pop and like the physicality, but she is it's bad. She is not a good striker. I can't emphasize it enough. And as a result, she just gets beat up. And it's in a way that, again, it doesn't make me feel better about Segula going forward. It just makes me feel worse about Alexieva. And like that, I can't even trust her to take an obvious pathway to victory. And that's a problem. Also, the haircut, not doing it for me. And I don't even mean like on a physical level. Like I don't find it attractive. But at the same time, like the whole broccoli hair thing that she has going on there, like her hair sells every punch that she gets hit with. So she needs to rethink that. She needs to rethink that pronto. So yeah, this was also not a very good fight. And then what was a good fight, though, was Ulanbekov versus Azat Maxim. I come out of this fight being a lot more bullish on Maxim because there was not a round that Ulanbekov took over with volume, which was my big concern for Maxim. Maxim was able to get takedowns, was able to show off a very good wrestling game, which we know he has, but against Ulanbekov, maybe the first person to ever like actually get more takedowns on Ulanbekov than he did. I could be wrong here. Let's see here. Ulanbekov outdid Carpenter. He outdid Durden. Tim Elliott. Tim Elliott had more takedowns. Okay, so Tim Elliott is the only other person to have done this. And that's putting yourself in pretty good company. And so, you know, the wrestling held out. The strength held out. The power held out pretty well. There is still, I think, a little bit of a pace uppage that has to happen for him. And I do think he got tired a little bit. But the fact that his highest output round was round 3, throwing 75 punches and landing 36 of them, is, I think, a positive sign. Now, Ulanbekov did win the fight, and I had him winning the first 2 rounds and losing the third, but that's kind of my point, is that my concern was that Maxim would start strong, and then Ulanbekov would take over. And the opposite happened. Ulanbekov won early, and Maxim won late. So, despite the loss, despite the setback, I do think that this points to an idea that Maxim's like coaching staff is trying to produce a UFC flyweight and trying to correct the regional habits that are baked into his game. And I look forward to them maybe hopefully doing that. I'm not really going to talk about Mohamed Usman versus Hamdi Abdelwahad. I had Usman winning. That's basically it. Hamdi Abdelwahad is kind of useless. Kind of like a female or a male version of Irina Alexieva, in the sense that like your path to winning was to find a way to implement your clinch wrestling game, which is very good, and you just did not have any way of doing that. And didn't seem to have any desire of doing that. And didn't seem to have any desire of throwing a lot on the feet, because even for heavyweight, Hamdi Abdelwahad is not throwing enough strikes. He landed 9 strikes in the first round. Like, good grief. Like, that's what it comes down to. He needs activity. He was under 20 strikes landed in 2 out of 3 rounds. Like, it's 9 strikes for Usman in the first round. But like 16, 18, 21, you can't do this. You need pace. You need something, because you're not a super slick one-punch knockout artist. You got a little bit of pop in your hands. You got some good durability, but you have to work faster, more aggressively, and actually get your wrestling game to work. And you're not doing that. And there we go. I'm very disappointed in Hamdi Abdelwahad. And then with Mohamed Usman, like, the problem is that there is something wrongly constructed in that man's body, because when he throws like any kind of punch, his entire body is out of whack. And like it should, against an actual better striker, it should lead to him getting hit a lot. Like a lot. But he got another win. And his UFC run has been better than I expected. He's up to 4-2 now? So he's beaten Zach Pauga, Junior Tafa, Jake Collier, and Hamdi Abdelwahad. Lost to Thomas Peterson and lost to Mick Parkin. And like, Parkin's a pretty solid fighter, and Peterson is slowly making a believer out of me. But yeah, I don't know. It's not really going anywhere. So yeah, neither of those fighters are going anywhere, and we kind of, I don't know, wasted our time with it. Anyways, we got the UFC 317 coming up, which is, I think, going to be a pretty damn good fight. There's a couple of bookings on the card I'm not super stoked for. I'm not really looking forward to, for example, Cedricus Dumas versus Jackson McVeigh, but like, would I be looking forward to either of them in any other capacity? Not really. And then you also have, I got to do more research on Alvin Hines. Maybe that Junta Diniz versus Alvin Hines fight will grow on me. The other one I don't like. Now, and to be clear, I think this is going to be a good fight. So don't throw the quality of the fight out. It's just I don't like the booking of Hyder Emil versus Jose Delgado. They're both fighters that I want to learn more about, and having them fight against each other when they're both such questionable quantities doesn't really help me. And it feels like not a step up. In fact, it's a step back for Hyder Emil, and it feels like an inappropriate step up or an inappropriate level of action for Delgado. So like, I don't like that matchup, but it is going to be a fun fight because it's, it's two action featherweights. It's gonna be really fun. It's just I would have done something else with them. And then, of course, you got the double title fight with Topuria versus Charles Oliveira for the vacant lightweight title, and Pantoja defending against Kai Kara-France, which, granted, Kai Kara-France being 1-2 in his last three kind of sours that as a title shot, but it is the best thing that they got like available right now, and it's fun. I just probably would have done Pantoja versus Merab myself, but that's B. And then Brandon Royval versus Joshua Van, Beetle Dariush versus Hanato Moicano, Peyton Talbot versus Felipe Lima, Jack Hermanson versus Gregory Rodriguez. That is a very, very, very solid main card. Actually, pardon me, Hermanson Rodriguez will be the feature prelim. But like, that's a really solid top of the card. Good matchmaking, a lot of stuff that makes sense both from an entertainment level, and also it makes sense based on where they are in their current careers. And I don't often get to say nice things about the UFC matchmakers, so thank you very much. Anyways, that'll be all. Check out the links down below for social medias. Video game stuff is also down there. Discord server. Please check that out. And tonight, I'm going to be running a little experiment in the Discord server. We're doing Costa Rica Deathmatch, which is no rules, basically like Mortal Kombat style stuff. And we're going to see how many people it takes to actually topple the openweight champion of Costa Rica, Byron, with like paper cuts, basically. Can we kill him with millions and millions of paper cuts? So I'll see you for the predictions for UFC 317, and I'm looking forward to that card coming up. This one, not so great, but I won't blame the UFC for putting together a main event that should have delivered and didn't.